Welcome to the Artists and Emotions podcast and a happy new year. First of all, I just want to say I hope that you've been having a really, really wonderful holiday season. It's gone. 2023 is behind us. And between you and me, I am very grateful for a lot of reasons. But it's a new year, and it's like I've been saying on my social media. First of all, for those of you who don't know me, my name is Cody Alexander Curtis. I am an actor, I'm a filmmaker, I'm a writer, and I'm just an overall creative person. I've been in the artistic scene, firstly with theater from the age of 5, and then in 2018, I really got started into film and filmmaking, and I've been there ever since. There's a lot of people who I have to thank, and honestly, it all comes down to support. 2023, as many people know, for me, it was a great year with a few highs, but it definitely had some very, very low points, as I'm sure it did for a lot of people. And I just want to say, before we get into the meat of what I'm doing with this podcast episode and with this video, thank you. Thank you to everybody, and I hope that you are ready to make 2024 just the best year that it can possibly be for you. That's going to mean something different for me and something different to everybody who's watching this or listening to this, but let's just make 2024 a great year overall. So here we are. Here we are. Honestly, it's amazing. And for those of you who are used to the podcast, you will notice that this is a little bit different. What I'm doing here is sort of the direction that I want to take with this podcast. It's still going to remain in its like pure audio format, but I want to introduce video, because if there is something that I want to do for all of the guests that I have on this year, if they are comfortable with it, I want people to see the actual faces to the people and guests who I'm talking with, so they can get something out of it. Like this podcast has been a journey. It's been a triumph. And the fact that it seems like you guys want more and more of it, like, it just makes me excited, makes me want to continue the conversation around mental health. And honestly, it just fills my heart with joy. Like, this podcast has been something that I've wanted to make for about five years now. And now it's officially happened. But before we continue on to the rest of all of this, for those of you who do not know what this podcast is about, this podcast is about mental health, and specifically about the mental health while pursuing or being in a creative space, like 90% of the time. As the podcast got started, it's mostly just been like actors and directors and creative people as a whole, but my hope is to branch it out eventually. Now, as we go along, let me just take a look at my keypad or my notepad here, because I did have to take notes in terms of the subject I wanted to talk about. So first and foremost, I already gave the thank yous, but it's not just for the podcast itself. This year, me and my good buddy, Zachary Tyler Wheaton, we made a film. We made a short film called Suitcases, which is a script that I personally had sat on for 3 years and had tried to get made for those 3 years, but it just never got made. And now it honestly had the chance to be made, and it came out better than either one of us were expecting. It's still, at the time of recording this podcast, it's still in the midst of post-production, and we have a lot of work we still got to do on it. But I want to thank him. I want to thank our camera team, which was Zachary Tyler Wheaton, who was also my co-director and director on the day of shooting, but our buddy Gabe Hurst, who was our director of photography, and our friend Gary, who was our assistant camera. He was also our main gaffer and grip, and he was our behind-the-scenes photographer. And then I have to thank Joshua Z. Timmerman, who was our main audio engineer and boom operator on the day. Fantastic work. And I've worked with him and this next person, Nicolette Amani, over the course of the time that I have been here in Georgia. Both of those people I have worked with, I have loved working with them, and I wanted to bring them on set, and they did. And it was honestly amazing. It was an amazing time overall. And now I got to give a big thank you to our cast, because without the tremendous cast that we had, this would not have been possible in any capacity. So first of all, I want to thank our lead, Rebecca. Rebecca Lee Brown, who was astounding, Heidi Crane, who was amazing, Haley Noel, who was just as fantastic, Jacob Martinez, and Josh Shafran. Like I said, across the board, the talent that we had on the crew and the cast side of things, they made this project the best that it possibly could be, and something that I didn't imagine we would make something as high quality as we did, but we got very fortunate. We got very lucky in how everything came across. It was truly, truly an amazing experience. Now, going off of amazing experiences and just learning from other people and learning in general, I learned a lot this year from myself, from a lot of different things, but there are some recommendations I want to make to anybody who is listening or watching this podcast. Some things that have truly helped me, some people who I followed or started following this year, some books, and then one or two podcasts that I started listening to this year that I just want to shout all of these things out before we move on to the next thing, because for me, they really were some things that affected me on a really deep and personal level, in terms of building my confidence up, in terms of building and growing my technique as an actor, and in terms of growing my art and technique as a creative. So the first thing I want to shout out is a few Instagram pages. One of these is attached to a podcast, or I guess a couple of them are. However, let's get started with that. First thing I want to do is give a shout out to Get Seen Studio. If there's any actors out there who want to learn sort of the intricacies of the entertainment business, at least from like a personal and artistic spectrum, I do highly recommend the team over at Get Seen Studios, because the information and the guests and everything they have on there is just fantastic. The next two pages are two women that I discovered this year, and that is Sam Valentine from One Broke Actress, and then Gabrielle Bindloss. I had heard about them like from time to time, and I only recently discovered them this year, but their information and their take on the industry and the hope that they give actors who may find this to be difficult, to feel like they need to burn themselves into the ground, and the way that they have sort of a holistic approach to being an actor, to being an artist, to living a life while also pursuing a career of greatness. And I learned so much from them, and specifically Sam Valentine and her podcast, One Broke Actress. She is another person who has a bunch of really amazing guests on the podcast. Sam Valentine, in terms of all the stuff, she has a lot of really great information. So highly, highly recommend her. Everybody I've mentioned before, Sam Valentine, One Broke Actress, Gabrielle Bindloss, and the team over at Get Seen Studios, highly recommend all of those people. Now, next up, I have a few books that I want to recommend. The first one is Atomic Habits by James Clear. That one, and just in terms of turning habitual things into a way to improve your life on a continuous basis, whether it's personal or work related, I don't think there's another book out there like it. For me, it really impacted me on a pretty large scale. This next book I'm going to mention, I think, is not only important for just people to learn about themselves and improve themselves, but also as artists, as storytellers, as people who want to create characters in the deepest level possible. The book, The Body Keeps the Score. I'm not going to try to pronounce the author's name because I don't want to butcher it, but I will say if there's one book this year that I can recommend every artist read, every storyteller, every writer, every person read, it is this one. And there's a specific reason for it. Because for me, the one thing that I focused this year on is trauma. And it's for one reason or another. But the one thing this book taught me is that so many of the decisions that we make as adults, so many of the things that make us who we are as adults, or our POV, is from the trauma or experiences we had in the past. And for me personally, it's something that I have found that I don't think there have been many. There might have been one acting instructor who focused on the fact that one of the biggest things that you can do to fully round out your character is look at the situations and things they have been through. Because once again, we're in a world where we're actors and we're storytellers and we want to focus on creating characters that are three-dimensional. Things like trauma or past experiences or childhood friendships or childhood romances, these are things that we don't necessarily always focus on. And for me, after reading this book, it's something that I did start to focus on. And I found for me personally, it is something that helped me as a person, but also me as an artist just grow in a capacity that I couldn't have imagined before. So that's another good one. Once again, that's The Body Keeps the Score. And the last one is, it's been around for a couple of years, but it's Green Lights from Matthew McConaughey. That book in particular, I took a lot from because it's really a pure example of your life is your own. And if you've got the opportunity for it, you shouldn't be afraid of anything, because the worst thing that life can tell you is basically no in terms of the things you're going after, but you just gotta pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and go after it again. Denzel Washington has a phrase that I enjoy, which is, if you fall 7 times, pick yourself up 8. And I think Green Lights is really a good example of that. And plus, having the charisma of Matthew McConaughey, I listen to audiobooks, so having an author read all of these, it really does feel also like a pure experience. So just to sort of round this out and sort of speak this again, the recommendations are Get Seen Studio, Sam Valentine and One Broke Actress, Gabriel Ben Loss. All of those are on Instagram. And then Get Seen Studio and One Broke Actress, they also are on podcasting platforms. So if you have the opportunity to, or you want to, go give those a look. And the books are Atomic Habits, The Body Keeps the Score, and Green Lights. So those are just that. And now I want to talk sort of briefly where this podcast is going to be going this year, because I am very excited about that. So 2024, well, you guys are already seeing or listening to one of the big changes I want to implement when it comes to this podcast, which is not just making it audio, but making it audio and visual, which for me, I think it's just, I'm super excited about it, because once again, this is a podcast that I've wanted to start it for quite a while now, and the fact that it's been received so much, and the fact that you guys want it to grow and succeed and you want to see more guests and all that stuff, it makes me really, really happy. The other thing that I want to do with the podcast this year is I'm not going to be doing a guest every single episode. I'm going to be recording a solo episode in between every single episode that I have a guest on here. Because for me, although it is great, I do sort of want to get you guys the personal aspect, or what my own actor and mental health journey has been like. Because I know I've sort of touched on it briefly, but I haven't really given like one-on-one personal episodes. And for me, I think it is super important, because I can have a lot of guests on and we can go over a lot of topics. But I feel as though if I'm not giving you guys sort of a personal, rounded worldview of what's going on in my own life, in my artistic life, and that you're gonna sort of it's not gonna hit the point home as much. And for everybody who's listening, I do I do think of you guys as like friends and students and colleagues and people who I can share stuff with. And of course, this is also personally for me, because getting some of this stuff out, even on a podcast, it is very cathartic in a really, really good way. In terms of the podcast, it's not going to be for like 4 or 5 months like the first season was. This is going to go year round. And so that being the case, I got to figure out when I'm going to do it, but I am going to implement like a week-long break away from the podcast, so that way I have time to recharge. The podcast can have a little bit of a reprieve. So we will be going there. And one thing is, I started it briefly when I started up the podcast, but I wasn't very good with it. I am going to be sharing full episodes on the podcast on YouTube, and then I'll be using social media in the way that they are supposed to be used. Like I'll be using Instagram and TikTok and those two platforms specifically to sort of show short snippets of what's going on the podcast and the subjects that we talk about. And then for YouTube and Spotify, I will be uploading the podcast in their full length version there. And then my hope for the podcast this year is to also get it onto some other podcasting platforms. So that should be good to go. And in terms of everything, that's all I have right now in terms of growth and trajectory and what I'm aiming for this podcast. I do have some other things in mind, but I'm not going to talk about those until it looks like they are going to be happening. So this is an episode of the Artists and Emotions podcast. So there are a few reflections and some things that I have taken from the year of 2023 that I want to talk about here. And for those of you who follow my personal account, which is _Cody_Curtis on Instagram, you'll know I talked about this briefly a few days ago. And the first thing I want to talk about and the first reflection is this whole idea around collaboration and competition. It is a general rule that inside of this industry, competition to get work it's there. Like, there's no denying that competition is there. But the one thing that I have found, at least for me personally, if I look at this industry, the people I work with, the people I audition against, the people who I will see on a regular basis, if I look at them as competition and not collaborators, it just drags my enjoyment of this process. It drags down my creativity. It drags down my relationships with the people in my personal life very much downhill. And why do I say that? Because I have experienced this firsthand. What a lot of you do not know about me, but you could probably figure because of the industry that we're all in, is that I used to be very competitive artistically. Like, I thought of other actors as competition, no matter who they were, no matter what their gender was, no matter what their casting type was. I thought of them as competition. Same thing with filmmakers. Like I said, I'm a filmmaker, I am a director, I am a writer. And so there was a long portion of time where I thought that competition and trying to beat out everybody around me was the most important thing to get seen. But the biggest thing that this year has taught me in regards to that is that as soon as you can put your own ego for competition and you can put your own ego aside when it comes to the people around you and look at them as collaborators, your whole world will open up. There is a lot of people who I have met this year who I could very easily think of as competition. But I would rather see them as friends, as collaborators, as artists with unique voices that have something to offer the world. And that is a change that, although it took me a while to find, as soon as I did, like I said, my whole worldview opened up. I feel happier about auditioning because it means that even if I don't get a job, I have the opportunity to meet some really cool people. If I audition in person and I see other people who might look exactly like me, one of those people, a couple of those people, I could start a conversation with and they could become my friends. Filmmakers that I team up with or learn about or hear about, I could network with them and get the chance to work with them on a project or go out to dinner with them or go out to coffee or lunch with them, have a conversation about our artistic journeys. And between you and me, guys, that worldview and those opportunities, I think of so much more than trying to beat out every single person who may be my casting type or my competition or anything else. Because if there's one thing that I have learned, not just for myself, but also from listening to people like Sam Valentine and Gabriel Ben-Loss and all this, is that if you can last, if you can give yourself longevity in this industry, things will start to open up. And for me, a big part of that equation, like I've been saying, is taking away the idea of competition, taking the idea away of beating other actors, of beating other filmmakers, of trying to be better than literally every other person, and thinking of every other person as collaborators who can make really cool stuff that I can become friends with, that I can learn cool stuff about, and we can make cool stories together. So that's point number one, competition versus collaboration. Part number two is probably the thing that took me the longest to learn. And by that, I mean, it literally took me until this past November to learn it. And that is giving yourself permission while you're on a creative endeavor and a creative pursuit to actually live a life and to actually give yourself opportunities away from the arts. And why do I say that? Because it's for very much a lot of the same reasons that competition and versus collaboration. It's a lot of for the same reasons why competition detracted from my life instead of adding to it. Because I was in so much fear about my competition and about the industry and everything else, I thought I needed to work 12 to 16 hours a day on everything, on productivity, on so many other things creatively, that I didn't think I was allowed to give myself permission to actually live a life away from things. But when we were preparing for Suitcases, if you guys want to know what the dynamic was between me and Zach, I did a lot of the producer and director work leading up to the actual shoot. And then on the day of the shoot, Zach was the on-set director. And the thing he said to me before we were on set, in November, he said, I want you to take a month off. This is your director telling his actor, take a break, go live your life, work on acting stuff if you want to, but give yourself permission to rest. And I did. I did every possible thing that I could to rest and restore myself. And the one thing I found is that I not only had more enjoyment for life, I actually started to like myself. I actually started to be in the present moment with my friends and with my family, and actually started to care about them more than I cared about me. And that's not to say that I didn't care about myself. That's me saying that sort of in the airplane principle, where you put your mask on before you put on other people's masks. I gave myself permission to take care of myself first before I sort of ventured out and took care of the people around me. And that's the one thing I'm going to be bringing with me the most in 2024, is that although I realize I'm a workaholic, you guys, I'm the kind of person who will still work on stuff if I go home for vacation, which is exactly what I did. But giving myself permission to just, on days where I might be feeling sick or down, or I need to give myself a break or let up the gas a little bit, allowing myself to do that. And when there's an opportunity to go out with friends, or to go to a really cool event, or go to a concert, or anything in those veins, to just expand the life that we're living, I'm going to say yes. Because I think that's one thing that also, it's not just like an entertainment industry thing and an actor thing and a creative thing. It's also sort of in a worldwide culture thing, where it feels like we are busier than we've ever been. We are more productive than we've ever been. We are more work culture and work oriented than we have ever been. And if there's one thing that this past year has taught me, it is not healthy. We've literally brainwashed ourselves into believing that all we have to offer is the work that we do, the hard challenges that we do, and we can never give ourselves a break to go visit family, to go on vacation, to go see, to go explore, to go travel the world. When for me, and I know it's taboo to say this, if I'm going to be perfectly honest, I think acting classes are great for rounding out your skill sets and in terms of acting technique and sharpening where you are. But the things that have helped me personally become a good actor and keep growing in my craft, it's not the things where I focus day in and day out on doing an actor's thing every single day. It's been the times where I've allowed myself to walk outside my door, touch grass, and just see what the world has to offer me in terms of friendship, in terms of growth, in terms of experience. And so the year of 2024, I'm going to still work hard, but I'm going to take the principle that it's okay to break away from the hustle and grind of everything to just live my life. And I hope you guys can take that with you too. All right. Now, on to the next point, which is that life has its ups and downs. What do I mean by this? Okay. So, I'm not going to go into the specifics of it, but 2023 for me, for my mental health, was probably the hardest year that I have had in a very long time. And of course, I did what I needed to. I did go back to therapy, which once again, there's a reason why every single episode of the podcast I've said I recommend therapy, because I know the power of what it can do. But this is something that I think we need to remember, not just as people, but as artists, as workers, as family members, and everything else. Life, specifically on a year-to-year and week-to-week basis, is filled with ups and downs. And one thing that I want to specifically talk about is the fact that it's okay to say you're not okay. I know specifically, if you go into the internet spectrum of things, there's this whole idea around the fact that showing your emotions and admitting that you're not okay and taking a break from work and not constantly being productive 24/7, it's kind of seen as taboo. When, for me, it's very, very interesting. Because depression and mental health rates, they're the worst that they ever have been. But at the same time, we're more productive and work-oriented and all of that stuff more than we ever have been in modern day. And I'm not going to say that there's a correlation or a causation or anything like that. I do think it's part of it, though. I do think it's part of the mental health equation here. And connecting all of this stuff, the whole idea of competition and collaboration, the whole giving yourself permission to live life, life being filled with ups and downs, it just brings me back to the reason why I started the podcast. Mental health in every aspect needs to be number one priority. Because if your mental health, very much like your physical health, is hurt in any kind of way, it's detrimental to you. It is detrimental to the people around you. It is detrimental in every possible way. And so this year, this podcast has meant a lot to me. And working with people and talking with people and making friends and collaborators and getting rid of this idea of competition, it has been so important to me because I have seen what just a constant hustle and a constant competition and constant isolation, and I've seen what all of this stuff can do to a person. And I'm not just talking about me, although it has affected me in that regard. Mental health and making sure that you're okay is the most important thing. And it's the reason why I'm excited to get this podcast off of the ground, because there's a lot of topics that I'm going to talk about and that me and my guests this year are going to be talking about. But the one thing I will always come back to is the fact that mental health is important. Mental health should not be neglected. Mental health is something that should be analyzed and looked at on a regular basis to make sure that you are okay. And if you need it, you should learn some systems to get in your corner so that on those days where you're feeling down, where you're feeling the worst that you possibly can, you can take care of yourself. And even if it doesn't take a day or 2 days or a week, you can eventually get yourself back to some level of normalcy. For me, I am someone who has struggled with mental health my entire life. It has been a constant challenge. And I, for the longest time, refused to take care of it because I thought that it would make me weak in the eyes of my friends, in the eyes of my relatives, in the eyes of, which is all nonsense. The one thing that I have learned most importantly this year is that if I can get some systems in place, if I can learn to just be myself, be happy with myself, and not give a shit what anybody else thinks of me, then I can be the most benefit to myself, to the world around me, and to the people I care about most. And so to wrap up this episode of the Artists and Emotions podcast, I just want to say, from me to you, make 2024 your best year. And I'm not just talking about work. I'm not just talking about thinking that you need to be putting yourself in the hardest, most difficult challenges because that's going to make you look tough. I am not talking about making sure that you can outwork every single person around you. Take care of yourself. That's what this all means. Take care of yourself so you can take care of your family, take care of your friends, take care of your business, take care of yourself artistically, and so you can actually live a life that you enjoy. There's too much misery in the world, and you don't need to make yourself miserable to be a part of it. If you can take care of your mental health, the one thing that I've learned specifically from this podcast is you can have an outreach to help other people who are in a similar situation that you are in, or to help people who need a helping hand. I'm excited to get this podcast off the ground. The first guest this year is going to be my best friend, Zach Pope, who I have known since 2017. And I'm excited for that. I'm excited for you guys to sit back and listen. But I'm excited to see what this year brings. My name is Cody Alexander Curtis, and this is the Artists and Emotions Podcast. See you guys on Friday.